It was a game 3 of the 2006 NBA Finals. It was the Miami Heat versus the Dallas Mavericks. There were 6 minutes left in the game, and the Heat were down by 13. They only had one timeout left in the game. And in the second half of the game, the Dallas Mavericks had been shooting lights out. They shot over 50%. And Dwayne Wade, the best player for the Miami Heat, had 5 fouls. One more foul, and he was out of the game. But it was almost like at that time, with 6 minutes left in the game, that he said, "This is enough, not on my court." And he started moving around and running around and hitting shots and playing defense. And he took the game up to a whole new level. And not only him, but Adonis Haslam had a key steal toward the end of the game. And then Shaquille O'Neal had a great play. He shot back-to-back free throws, which was pretty much of a miracle because all that game they had been practicing what they called the hack-a-shack. They had been hitting him on the arm and making him shoot free throws, and he had been missing the majority of them. And he shot back-to-back free throws at the key point of the game. And without those points, the Heat might have lost. But the Heat went on to win the game. The first playoff game, the first finals game that the Heat won, Wade would finish the game with 42 points, with 13 rebounds. And it was amazing. Not only did they win that game, but they went on to win every other game against the Mavericks, and they made history. And I was able to watch that game. And it was exciting because I was there watching it for the first time in 2006. And the kids were there with us, and they were very small. And now I'm watching it again on the replay. It was a great game. And then after that, I was able to watch the Miracle on Ice this weekend as well. It was the game where the U.S. versus the Soviets, the 1980 Olympic hockey game. It was the 40th anniversary of that game. And the people they were interviewing, the key players of that game, 40 years later explained that that game was still important. Very important. In fact, it was almost as if that game had given the United States a new sense of confidence, a new feeling that they could move forward, that they could do things, that they could fix the things that were broken and messed up with the country. And it propelled them into the future. That was the turning point in turning our country around and moving forward. That was the beginning of where they started shouting, "USA, USA, USA." They were interviewing one of the key players. It was kind of funny. He said anybody who worked as hard as we did knew that they had a chance to win, but nobody else thought they had a chance to win. You see, the hockey team for the Soviets was a professional team. It was the best team in the world. It had won and won and won and won, and nobody was able to even get close to them. And the U.S. team was a group of college students. They were young, and they'd only played together for a few months, and it was impossible for them to beat the Soviets. Not a chance that they could win. But yet, they won anyway. They beat the greatest team in the world. And they were so excited. They were so thrilled. They had finally done it. Somebody had finally beat the Soviets. It was so exciting, but that wasn't the end of things, because they had to play Finland for the last medal round in order to win the gold medal. After they'd beat the greatest team in the world, they had to play that one more game, and they found themselves down in the game 2-1. They weren't playing very well. It was the last period of the game. And Coach Herb Brooks, the U.S. Olympic coach, stuck his finger at the players and said, "If you lose this game, you will take it to your grave." In the last period, he said, "If you lose this game, you'll take it to your grave." And then he turned around and walked out. And the players said they would have busted through the walls if they had to finish that game. And boy, did they finish it. They did an amazing, had a second half or third period that was absolutely amazing. Team USA went out and scored 3 points in that last period to win the gold medal. And it was declared the greatest event in the history of sports. 40 years later, it's still important. The greatest event in the history of sports. And seeing these games this weekend, or maybe it was because last week I had a near fatal birthday. Well, I was thinking about what was going on. And I just thought to myself, what do I need to do? What is it that I need to do that if I don't do it, I'll have to take this to my grave? It will be so important that I'll still remember it. And I'll look back on my life and I'll say it wasn't complete. It wasn't right because I didn't do this. What is it in my life that I need to do? What opportunity do I have to do the right thing? And how about you? We live in a time when the pace has probably slowed down in your life. You have time to do things that you haven't had time to do in a long time. You have the ability to decide what you're going to do with your time. You even have the time to sit and to think about what's going on in your life, to think about the future. Well, what have you done with the last 5 weeks? And more importantly, what are you going to do in the next 5 years? Because time is something that we all have in common. Every single one of us have 168 hours a week. The question is, what are you going to do with it? What are you going to do with it? Paul tells us in Ephesians 5:15 and 16, he gives us some great advice. He says, live your life then with a due sense of responsibility, not as men who do not know the meaning and purpose of life, but as those who do. Make the best use of your time, despite all the difficulties of these days. There's one Greek word that's translated, make the best use of your time. It's adgorazo, and it means out of or from. And adgorazo means to go to the market and to buy something. It means to go to the market and buy everything that they have. It means to go, maybe you have a banquet coming and they would go to the market and they would go and buy everything that they had in preparation for that banquet that they were having. It means buy up everything, make the most of the opportunity. And that's what Paul is telling us. That's what he's advising us. Because there's 3 things that we can do with our time. We can spend it, we can waste it, or we can invest it. And the best use of our time is to invest it in something that's going to outlast us. Invest it in something that really matters. Invest it in something that's still going to be important, not just 40 years from now, but 40,000 years from now. And that's your relationship with God and your relationships with others, because the spiritual things in your life matter forever. Paul says, live as men who know the meaning and purpose of life, because you know the real meaning of life. You know what life is all about. And though it may seem like you're kind of wandering around, as J.R.R. Tolkien said in The Lord of the Rings, not all who wander are lost. It may feel like you're wandering around. It may feel like there's not really a purpose, but you know your destination. You know your purpose in life. You know what you're here to do. It's all about loving God and loving people. That's why you're here. That's the purpose. Love God and love people. And you do that by having a relationship with Jesus Christ. You do that through his strength and through his power. Paul also says, make the best use of your time. Despite all the difficulties of these days, make the best use of your time. Because one day, you're going to stand before God, and he's going to ask you, what did you do with the time that I gave you? Are you just sitting on the couch? What are you doing with your life? Make the most of your time and get off the couch.